Sunday, March 27th, 2022. This is All About Your Benjamins and your weekly mixtape. Hope you've had a great week. Before we get to those headlines, I want to wish my wife Angela a happy birthday a day in advance. So tomorrow will be her birthday on Monday, but thought I would give her a shout out on today's broadcast as well. So I want to wish her a happy 40th birthday today. Or I guess this is a big year for both of us turning 40. So happy birthday to Ange. Love you very much. Hope you have a great day tomorrow. We have some fun things planned for you, me and the boys. So wanted to kick things off with that. Now, let's get to the headlines that may or may not be impacting your financial plan and portfolio. And as you can see below, just a handful of things to go. I was scouring through, and while there's always news going on, there wasn't really anything that I thought was like really important to go over this week, which is sometimes refreshing. You know, the market bouncing around, up and down, volatility, down one day, up the next day, erasing those losses, erasing those gains. Not a lot to say there. So let's hit to a few of the headlines that just continue to go from week to week as they progress. And you could probably guess that one of the first ones is going to be the Fed. So Chairman Powell came out this week and said that the Fed was prepared to move more aggressively, if necessary, to combat inflation. So if the economy continues to show that it's doing well, they are prepared to raise at a faster rate as far as not necessarily more numbers, but at a bigger increase. So the last time, this month when they raised rates, they raised it at 0.25%. So it's between 0.25 and 0.5. So they are setting the stage that they may raise by 50 basis points. So 0.50%. So double what they raised the first time to try to keep off inflation. Now, you're reading more about this and listening more about it. It is a tough environment for the Fed to kind of walk this. They're saying they're on a tightrope, but I've heard them say the Fed's on a tightrope a million times over the last 10 years. But nonetheless, they're raising rates, trying to slow down the economy with inflation going up, coming out of 12 years of a bull market. So a lot of things going on that are going to make things difficult for them. But I am optimistic they're going to navigate this and be successful in the way of kind of controlling things. Doesn't mean it's going to be pretty. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. But I think they're going to be communicating and over-communicating what the expectations are, because they have to kind of navigate the narrative to try to keep the investors from getting spooked. So nonetheless, they are prepared to raise more. They didn't guarantee they would, but they put that on the table. So that way, thinking forward, if they were to raise by 50 basis points, had they not said that now, it would have been a shock. Now, if they're raising it by 50 basis points, you could look at that as a positive. That's saying that the economy, in their eyes, is strong enough to stomach a higher increase than we did before. Lowering interest rates would suggest that the economy is not doing well, so we don't want to see that. So they just have to kind of put things out there so they don't surprise investors, which is silly because we're all told that the institutional investors are the ones who control the market, and they're supposed to be the smart money. Yet you have the Federal Reserve navigating your narratives to try to keep the investors, supposed to be you and I, the mom and pops of the world, from overreacting and selling. So nonetheless, that's what they're talking about right now. We'll continue to monitor that. Tying into rates going up, the next article talks about mortgage rates. They're at a high. So 30-year mortgage rates rose to, on average, a 4.42% interest rate. It wasn't that long ago. I was recommending clients refinance. We personally refinanced below 3%. So rates have come up, and the expectation that as the Fed raises rates, mortgage rates will go up as well, which will put an interesting dynamic to housing. So not enough supply. You have sales of homes going above ask, cash prices going fast. So it's not enough supply out there. And you have rising interest rates. So you have people who want to get into houses. There's not enough supply, yet interest rates are going up on the mortgages. Now, if you think about it, it's kind of not amazing, but it's interesting that as interest rates go up, the same house becomes more expensive, even if the price were to stay the same, just because of the cost of borrowing. So that's why people want to try to move and lock in low rates. What do we do with this information? Well, if you can find a house and you need to move versus a want to move, it's most likely going to get more expensive in the future for you to make that move. Now, I mentioned it a few weeks ago. I don't think you should rush into buying a home and getting into a new home right away because of interest rates going up. You could always plan to afford a more expensive house payment in the future to offset interest rates. It's nice to have a low one, but there have been higher interest rates through history, and people have navigated those markets before. So I never want to rush just because of that. But if the timing is right and everything's lined up, it's what you want, it's what you need, then maybe sooner rather than later just to lock in those rates. If you haven't refinanced and somehow you're in a high interest rate, rates are only going to go up. Look to refinance. Another thing, I was talking with a client this week, they have an ARM. So an ARM is an adjustable mortgage. That means after a certain period of time, that rate is going to go up. And it's a low ARM. The reason you would use an ARM is the expectation is that you may not be there for a long term. So maybe you're buying a house you think you move in 5 or 6 years. You might do a 5-year ARM. So you have a locked-in rate for 5 years. After 5 years, the rate will go up to whatever is current market. And there's usually caps to them. So they can't go from 2% to 6%, most likely. It's usually like a 2% cap or something along those lines. ARMs are what caused a lot of problems back in 2006, 2007. You had people getting these really low interest rates, and when those ARMs would reset, their payments would jump double or triple, and that's why people walked away from the homes. ARMs aren't as popular today. They're not being given away like they were back then, so I don't look at that as a problem for the housing market. But if you find yourself in a position where you are under an ARM mortgage and you are looking at prices of homes have outpaced where you might go into and you might stay in your current house longer, you may want to look at refinancing that ARM, even though it's at 4.4 versus 2% where you may have come from. If you think you might outlive the ARM, then you may want to consider refinancing. You may not, but it's worth considering, because what you could find yourself in is a situation where your ARM expires, your rate jumps, prices are still too high, you don't move. The next year, your rate jumps again, and you could be pricing yourself out of the house that you like, where you could have locked that rate in. Yes, it's higher than it was a year ago, but it's going to be locked in from a most likely higher rate in the future. So something to consider out there, not financial advice, but something to be aware of, something to talk about with your financial professional about, okay, I've got an ARM, what should I do, with the expectation of rates are going to continue to rise over the coming years. So that's out there. Jobless claims, we talk about jobs report. That ties into the labor market, which ties into wages, it ties into inflation, all these things we talk about all the time. Jobless claims are at the lowest level since 1969. It fell to 187,000 jobless claims. There's a couple of numbers in the article I thought was interesting. Continuing claims, which are the people who are on unemployment that goes continuing, moved down to 1.35 million from 1.42 million the previous week. That's the lowest level since 1970. And another number that I thought was very interesting as I scroll down to find it, and if I can't, I'll throw it in the notes later on because I don't want to go on and on too long, but it was the number of people who had given up. Naturally, as I'm looking at it now, I can't find it. So I'll put it in the notes before, but bear with me 1 second. I had it all queued up. Here we go. In early March, there were about 2.8 million people who weren't working because they'd either given up or were caring for somebody else, and that's down from 7.8 million. The people who were afraid to work because they're afraid of getting sick fell from 3 million to 2.3 million. So we're seeing more and more people tied to the COVID job losses going back to work. So I apologize for the delay, but I wanted to get those numbers out there. I just thought those interesting numbers that I haven't seen measured before. Truthfully, I don't know how they survey that, how they get that, but that's the numbers that they're quoting right now, so that's kind of what we look at. But the good thing is, jobless claims are going down. Fewer people have given up, which shows that the demand for labor is very tight, as you probably know. If you have any friends who run a business, if you go to restaurants, it's like people can't hire quick enough and get good help. You're seeing individuals walk away from jobs because they don't get enough vacation. Talking to a client this week, she was saying that they're having a hard time hire because their company is kind of old and they only give 2 weeks vacation. And a lot of people are wanting 3 weeks, and people are walking away from good jobs, high salaries, because they can't get 3 weeks at one place and they can go get it somewhere else. A lot of times people would have just sucked that up and took the good job, but now they have such demand to get a good job, they don't have to take that if they don't want it. So the jobs market it's a good and a bad thing. It's good that it's low. It's bad for employers who can't find good help, but it's good for the employees because they have the ability to negotiate. So we'll keep an eye on that. The other big news this week is the confirmation for Ketanji Brown Jackson for the Supreme Court is going on, and it looks like there's going to be smooth sailing. She's going to get through that. Such a long process, and I don't even really know if there's a lot of value to it other than it's just kind of show. I've never watched it, but I just feel like in these congressional and in these hearings along these lines, it's just a lot of grandstanding and people talking to hear themselves talk. May not be the case with Supreme Court, but I feel like they already know everything about her. I guess this is for the public to hear, But nonetheless, it looks like she's going to be the next Supreme Court justice. A news story coming out yesterday regarding another Supreme Court justice that'll be interesting to follow along. Clarence Thomas's wife texting one of President Trump's aides or higher-ups during the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So interesting to see where that goes. That'll definitely be a drama headline, but that is out there as well. So you've got the positive of a new justice. You have a justice who is currently ill, and that'll be interesting to see how true that is. And his wife having, texted President Trump's aides talking about trying to overthrow the election. So nonetheless, D.C. is going to continue to provide us with a lot of entertainment. The final headline has nothing to do with the market, but it's one that I have a special interest in. I'm excited to see that Nike and Kobe Bryant's estate, led by Vanessa Bryant, have come to an agreement to bring Kobe's shoes back to Nike. So you probably weren't following along with this. You're not a sneakerhead or a big Kobe fan like I am. But after he passed away, the contract that Nike had with Kobe ran up, and the terms that they were giving Vanessa were not what she wanted. And they were not going to make any more Kobe's. You couldn't order them anymore. The prices of the shoes went up on the resale market. And NBA players and college players were doing everything they could to gather. It's been interesting to watch. Being a fan of shoes, Kobe's are all over the place. It used to be Jordans were worn a lot, and they still are, but Kobe's shoe is the most popular shoe in the NBA. And you see a lot of them that have been dead stocked for years being played in. And it's cool to know that they're going to come back. So the neat thing about it is they're going to be launching a shoe that will be the Mamacita, which is for Gigi, and all of the proceeds from that are going to go to the Mamacita Foundation that is going to be put on by the Bryant estate for good causes. So one, I'm glad to see the Kobe's back. I'm looking forward to seeing those come on the store and getting them from the boys when they play basketball. Roman's already said he wants a pair of Kobe's as his next basketball shoe. And it's good to see that there's a agreement, and Vanessa feels like they're respecting the family and Kobe and what they're trying to accomplish and using the sales, especially of Gigi's shoes, for good. I'm glad because they were going to try to make Kobe's on their own, and not that they couldn't have done a good job, but I saw the prototypes, and they're nowhere near as sleek and as good as what's on Nike. So hopefully Nike keeps those designs true. They don't mess with the brand. They make it look good. They make something that Kobe would have worn, and we get to see Kobe shoes all over the place again. So again, not something that's going to impact your financial plan or portfolio, but it is a headline that I find interesting, and it's good to see. So with that, I will let you get to your weekend. As always, thanks for tuning in. A new episode of the next episode is going to be coming out this coming week, so be on the lookout for that. I know my dad's been working on that, taking his notes and making sure he's prepared, so that'll be a good one. And be sure to subscribe and follow the YouTube channel, the podcast, all of those things. Working on getting a couple guests. I have some friends who've written some great books. One that will be coming out in April that I want to have on, and another one that's already been out that's about allocations and investing that I want to have him on as well. So should have a couple interview podcasts coming to All About Your Benjamins as well. And if you're looking for The Pursuit, don't forget pursuit.co is where you can find everything there. This week's Pursuit already launched. It came out on Friday like usual, but it's living over there now on its own brand, having a space to grow. So with that, thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all in the next episode.